Disc personalities. That's what this video training is all about. And what are the disc personalities? Well, the D is for dominance, the I, influence, the S, steadiness, and of course the C, compliance. Over the years, one thing that we have noticed as the company is that optometric practices don't do a disc personality assessment of their teams, especially in the beginning, right at the hiring process, let alone for staff members that have been within the organization over time. But if you look at the rest of the eye care industry or the rest of the healthcare industry, suppliers, service providers, they are always prioritizing the disc personality. Why? They want to always make sure that they've got the best possible teams on board that match the needs and the goals and objectives of the company. Will this particular individual fit and gel with the organization as a whole? And what characteristics are most dominant or personality characteristics are most dominant with regards to this individual, so that when we give them roles and responsibilities pertaining to their work objectives, we know that this is how this particular employee will best be suited and positioned and structured within the organization in order for the organization to bring out the best out of this individual. Whereas if you look at optometric practices, hardly any optometric practice looks at disc personalities as a key component in ensuring that they've got the right team on board. This is very important that you understand how disc personalities work and what characteristics are most dominant or high or low pertaining to that particular personality characteristics, whether it be the dominance, the influence, the steadiness, or the compliance. And so in this video training, we will look at the following characteristics that we will profile as examples pertaining to the personalities that are pertaining to the disc. And so value to the company, management style, fear, motivational component, engagement component, communication style, and as well as the describing words that best suit that particular personality characteristic. And we will look at both high factors and low factors. Starting off with the high factors. If you look at the value to the company with regards to the dominance personality, it's more directing for tangible results, whereas the influence personality, leading, working with people, and of course the steadiness personality, it's service support, technical specialist. And with regards to compliance personality, it's quality, detailed analytics. And so I've broken it down like that in those quadrants. So take out your notebook, which I hope you have been following with a notebook, making notes as we are going along with this video training, and do 4 columns. The first column, right at the top left, characteristic, then followed by dominance, steadiness, a column for dominance, a column for influence, a column for steadiness, and a column for compliance. So as I go throughout the training, make those notes and put the necessary describing words that I'm mentioning based on the following, or based on the block that you're dealing with at that particular point in time. Starting with the first characteristic that we have just alluded to, which is value to company. And like we said, the directing, tangible for results is the dominance personality. Then we said influencer or influence personality, leading, working with people as a high factor. And steadiness personality, we said it's service support, technical specialist. That's the type of value that they will bring or add to the organization. And compliance, it's then quality, detailed, and analytics. And so even within your optometric team right now, or your healthcare practice right now, you'll find that you've got employees who have one of these characteristics that are more dominant as compared to the other characteristics. And so as you're doing this for yourself, also then at a later stage, you're going to do it as a team and discuss it with your team. For example, the second characteristic here is management style. We said the dominance personality is more of an autocratic management style, whereas the influence personality is democratic. And then the steadiness personality is more procedural. And of course, the compliance personality is very much predictable. You know what to expect from them. They're going to do certain things in a particular way every single time. That's high factors that influence these personality characteristics the most. If you look at what does the dominance personality fear the most, they fear failure more than anything. The influence personality fears rejection as a high influencing factor. And the steadiness personality fears insecurity. So they've got insecurity as a fear that they have. And conflict is what the compliance personality will fear the most. What motivates each personality the most? The dominance personality, goals, power. They want a seat at the top of the table or at the top of the pyramid. That's basically how they are in terms of what motivates them. The influence personality, recognition. It's all about recognition. They want people to know that they did that. Very, very important for them as a motivating factor. Whereas the steadiness personality, it's more about stability than anything else. So if they get the impression or the feeling that this is a stable environment, they will bring their A game to that environment. Whereas the compliance personality, guidelines is what motivates them. Things need to be put in place clearly. So how does this relate to the optometric practice? You might be the decision maker in the practice, or you're an employee and you have a personality characteristic of a steadiness individual or a steadiness personality, and your boss or your person that you're reporting to could have a dominance personality characteristic. And so you want things done in a particular manner, very procedural. You don't want to be insecure. You want stability. Service support and technical specialists are the things that you are adding as value to the company. Whereas the team or your employer could be under dominance as a personality, and they're doing things that are completely clashing with yours. And you guys could be clashing simply because you did not take time doing the DISC personality. So the DISC personality helps you understand how or what characteristics best define that particular individual. And when you know what defines this particular individual, you are able then to know how to communicate with this particular individual. They then also know how to communicate with you as an individual. And you work on each other's strengths and weaknesses. And it's something that you have to do. There are various DISC personality programs or courses that you can do online that can actually give you immediate results. And what they do is they give you what your characteristic profile is pertaining to DISC personality and what your team's characteristics or profile will be, how best to communicate with that type of characteristic, and how not to communicate with that type of characteristics. When the team can go through that, there's only 4 or 5 of you, right, in an optometry practice in most cases. You are then in a position to understand that, I communicate best with this person like this. And sometimes there are certain characteristics that are actually producing the worst out of you as an individual. And there are those that are producing the best out of you as an individual. So it's very, very important. When you have done the DISC personality assessments as a team, you are then sharing that information and looking, guys, what best do we do then to communicate with one another? Because how you're going to be communicating is going to influence the culture that is going to exist in that organization, in that practice. So it's very, very important that you understand why we're sharing this personality information with you, so that you can go back in your working environment and initiate the process to say, hey guys, how about we do this as a team with ourselves, so that we can actually have a better understanding of who we are as individuals, what personality characteristics best to define each other. And once we understand that, it's going to make it easier for us then to communicate more effectively, more efficiently, with respect, with courteous, with the manner or in a manner that is going to bring the best form of communication out from the other individual. And so if you look at communication style of the dominance personality, it's more telling, whereas influencer, it's more selling, whereas the steadiness personality, it's more listening, and the compliance personality, it's more writing. So that's, for example, where I fall in. When at the beginning of my professional journey, when I did this, I remember I had joined one of the pharmaceutical companies, and they did this with me to try and determine what type of personality characteristics are best suited for me as an individual. And at the time, I was a D and a S. Over time, I learned how to develop the I and the C. So it does not mean that this is who I am and I stay as this is who I am. The whole point of this is for you then to have qualities that bring out the best out of you, that can help and aid in your personal and professional journey as an individual. So what I then did, I went further and I said, wait a minute, there are certain personality characteristics of the influence personality that are actually quite good, that if I apply them in my journey, in my work environment, they're actually going to benefit me when I'm communicating with clients, when I'm trying to sell something. Because why? A communication style of an influencer is selling as a high factor. So if I can develop that, if I can develop the one of a compliance personality, which is writing, it's going to help me with regards how I communicate. So if I have all four and I'm trained in all four, what does that mean? It means irrespective of my audience type, when I produce content, when I'm communicating with patients, and I can pick up certain energies from a patient or a customer or a client, when I'm busy giving a quotation, whatever the case that I'm doing, or I'm telling them about the product that they are going to be receiving. Once I can pick up certain characteristics in them that I also understand, then I know some people, I can communicate with them about the product that they're going to have verbally, right? Others, I might have to just listen to them in terms of what are their concerns and questions that they have pertaining to this product. Others, I might just have to draw on the test card an example of how this is going to actually influence how they see. So me drawing an eye and drawing how the lens is going to work, it's going to win them over versus had I just limited the conversation to just communicating verbally. So when I've got all four communication styles at play, I'm then able to utilize them in whichever way that will produce the required results. And even when I'm communicating with my team, the person that prefers writing and I'm more verbal, I then know how to come down to their level in order to communicate more effectively and more efficiently so that we can understand one another and be in agreement with one another and move forward. When we move forward, we will then be able to produce the necessary results that is required by the business. And so it's very, very important that you're not just listening and hearing me saying, oh, dominance characteristic or personality is this, and then you say, this best describes me, and then you leave it at that. You need to take this information, go and do the DISC personality assessments yourself, then do it with your team, and then analyze the details and work through it with one another so that you can best understand how to develop other characteristics that can help you on your own journey. The engagement component, the dominant personality is more of a force of character, whereas the influencer, they engage on the level of personality. And the steadiness personality, it's more on experience, whereas the compliance one, it's all about the engaging on their knowledge. So that's an engagement component as a characteristic that you will pick up or identify with regards to the different individuals. The describing words, remember we're still talking only about the high factors pertaining to the different personality characteristics. Describing words for the dominance personality, it's driving, inquisitive, forceful, direct, assertive, competitive, self-starter. Whereas influence personality, it's more influential, They're very persuasive. They're very verbal with regards to their opinions and their views on particular subject matters. They are a networker. They're usually friendly people, positive, and of course, very, very good communicators. And that's an influencer personality and the describing words surrounding them. Whereas if you look at the steadiness personality, the describing words for them, they're dependable, deliberate, they amiable, persistent, they are a good listener, very kind, very thoughtful. Why? It goes with the previous characteristics that we had mentioned or alluded to in terms of stability, listening, very procedural. So those are things that define the personality of a steadiness personality. Whereas compliance, the describing words, it's more compliant, careful, systematic, precise, accurate, perfectionist, very logical. And so all of these are either going to be very good or very bad, depending on how you take this information and apply it for yourself. Let's go further and look at the same. So on your column, now you're doing another block, characteristic at the far left, then dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. And now your heading here is DISC personalities, low factors. So let's look at the value to the company in terms of the low factors pertaining to the different ones. Dominance will be conserving assets, influence, analytical and factual in terms of the value to the company. Whereas the steadiness, low factor, can handle change. Not really. That's why it's a low factor. Remember, they like stability. So if there's constant change, it will then be a low factor for them. Whereas compliance, they are always on the back end of things. Looking at the quality assurance, detailed work, analytics. But a low factor is when they have to make decisions. If you look at the management style of a dominance personality, the low factor is compliance. That's a low factor because the high factor was more autocratic. That means they're making the decision. But a low factor here is when they have to make or be part of a collective decision. Influencer, one-to-one versus democratic. Remember, with democratic management style, it's everyone has a say. But with a low factor, it's then one-to-one. That's why we allude to the management style as a low factor. A steadiness personality, management style, low factor would be being hurried, whereas the compliance personality, it will then be unpredictable. What is a low factor for a dominance personality? We say here competition. Remember, the high factor was they feared failure, and so a low factor would be competition. And they never want to lose. They never want to lose, and so they're not afraid of competition. They like it because that's an opportunity for them to win. Influencer, public exposure is a low factor. Steadiness personality, repetition as a low factor, and compliance personality, conflict. Whereas if you look at the motivational or motivating factors for our dominance personality, non-competition. The influence personality would be task as a low factor in terms of if they have to be given a task, it's a low factor for them. Variety for a steadiness personality would be a low motivating factor because why? Stability is something that they hold very dear and very high. So if you now having to vary out of things, it's a low factor for them and they won't be necessarily motivated in that regard. And then compliance, the motivational low factor here would be, or motivational low factor would be freedom to act. If you look at the communication style of the dominance personality pertaining to low factors, sensitive, whereas factual would be that of the influence personality, and being very brief would be a low factor in terms of a communication style for the steadiness personality, and stubbornness would be that of the compliance personality as a low factor communication style. If you look at how the dominance personality would engage as a low factor, non-aggressive, the individually would be a low factor for the influence personality, because remember we said in terms of engagement it's more of about personality and getting everyone else on board, whereas the steadiness personality, it's a low factor of engagement, it's opportunity. And the compliance personality characteristic pertaining to engagement component as a low factor would be again stubbornness, whereas the communication one was actually discussion. And so describing words for a dominance personality would be hesitant, non-demanding, mild-mannered, low decision need, accommodating. Whereas if you look at the influence describing words, probing, reserved, reflective, serious, self-conscious, and suspicious. Whereas the steadiness personality is a low factor describing words, mobile, active, alert, restless, and demonstrative. And finally, the compliance low factor pertaining to describing words, firm, persistent, independent, strong-willed, and stubborn. And so you have now written or completed your block for the high factors regarding the DISC personality, and now you've just done it for the low factors pertaining to the DISC personality. And so this is just a brief introduction to what the different personality characteristics are. So like I said earlier on in this training video, go back now as a team and get onto the various different online programs that you can find, or online assessments that you can find online that you can actually do as a team. And you'll be very interesting what information that you guys are going to gather from it and how it's going to help you become a better team. Very, very important. And it's also going to then obviously influence how you communicate with one another within the practice.